Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Professional reality show contestant and former White House aide Omarosa Manigault is back in the news, this time as a pundit. Here's her latest critique of Vice President Mike Pence. Watch.
As bad as y'all think Trump is, you would be worried about Pence. We would be begging for days of Trump back if Pence became president. It's scary.
In just a moment, Piers Morgan joins us with a reaction to that. He and Omarosa, you might remember, competed on Celebrity Apprentice several years ago. He says she offered him sex in order to win and then attacked him and his family when he turned it down. Sounds seedy and weird? Of course it is. But it's still not the strangest thing happening in Washington right now. Tonight we have more on the ongoing saga of the Trump dossier. Senators Chuck Grassley and Lindsey Graham have launched a probe into former National Security Advisor Susan Rice. In the very final minutes of the Obama administration, just after noon on Inauguration Day 2017, Rice sent herself an email on the White House computer system. In it, she described a meeting she'd attended just 2 weeks before, on January 5th. At that meeting were President Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, FBI Director Jim Comey, Deputy AG Sally Yates, and Susan Rice herself. According to Rice in this email, Obama instructed the officials in the room to consider withholding national intelligence from the incoming Trump administration in case they were compromised by Russia. In other words, almost 2 months after the presidential election, Barack Obama viewed Trump not as his democratically elected successor, but as a traitor and a Russian spy. Obama viewed himself as someone who somehow had the right to withhold government documents from an elected president. That's not the behavior of someone who believes in democracy. And yet that meeting set the tone for that year and all subsequent arguments since. Democrats have treated Trump and his election as illegitimate ever since then. And at the heart of their case against Trump and this administration is the Steele dossier. To this day, the dossier is the only publicly available document that details alleged collusion with Russia. Now, of course, we've talked a lot about the dossier on this program, but relatively little about what is in it. What does the dossier actually claim? Is any of it true? After more than a year of probing by politicians and intelligence agencies and journalists, here's the sum total of what we actually know about the document that started all of this. We know the dossier was compiled by Christopher Steele, acting as a contractor of Fusion GPS, with funds supplied by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC. The dossier was a form of opposition research designed to be used against Trump in the presidential campaign. It was not an intelligence document, it was Oppo. The dossier claims that Russian authorities didn't simply collude with Trump during the 2016 election, the charge you hear a lot about. It also claims that Russian intelligence cultivated Donald Trump as a kind of asset, a kind of one-man sleeper cell for more than 5 years. Needless to say, there's no evidence of that. The dossier also claims the Kremlin fed the Trump team intel reports on Hillary Clinton and other political opponents for years. There's no proof of that either. It claims Trump was favored by Moscow with lucrative Russian real estate deals as part of his cultivation as a political asset, that sleeper cell. No proof there either. According to the dossier, Trump and Russia were exchanging intelligence with each other for at least 8 years. No proof of that. The dossier goes on to describe a clandestine meeting in Prague between Trump lawyer Michael Cohen and a Kremlin representative, supposedly that took place in August of 2016. This is one of the very few claims in the dossier that has been conclusively checked, and it's false. Cohen wasn't even outside the U.S. at the time the meeting supposedly took place. In sum, the Steele dossier is absurd. The closer you read it, the more absurd it is. Take 10 minutes and do so yourself. It's online. And as you read it, ask yourself, who would believe something like this? It's so transparently partisan and unlikely and stupid and flimsy. It reads like a parody of a badly written spy novel. At the same time he was firing people on The Apprentice, Donald Trump was working with Vladimir Putin to subvert America. It's hard even to say that with a straight face. It's that stupid. And yet keep in mind and never forget, this is the document the FBI used to justify spying on American citizens. These are the claims that Democrats in Congress repeatedly cited as the reason to stop the normal functioning of government in order to investigate the administration. This is the famous dossier that even today, progressives in the media are spending millions in an attempt to corroborate. And it's all a stupid joke. Amazingly, a lot of people in power fell for it. Congressman Ron DeSantis is a Republican representing the state of Florida and joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Good evening.
So the meeting that Susan Rice describes in her email between the president and vice president, Sally Yates, Comey, is really revealing. So Trump was accused of considering Obama foreign with the birther stuff, but Obama actually turned out did consider Trump foreign, a foreign agent. Can a sitting president deny government documents, intelligence, to an incoming president?
I don't see how you can do that. I mean, just think about what Yates was on to at the time with Michael Flynn met with Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. That was one of the reasons why she sent the FBI agents to Flynn once he got in the... So they were creating some type of boogeyman, really out of Flynn acting like any incoming national security advisor would.
A president's authority and legitimacy comes from voters winning an election. That's what makes you the president. So how can one president say, I don't think the next guy should have this, I don't think he's worthy of this information? That just doesn't...
Yeah, I think it's improper to do that. And it's interesting, this January 5th meeting in the Oval with Comey, what did Comey do that very next day? That was when he briefed Trump on the dossier. He went to Trump Tower, he showed him the dossier. That eventually got leaked to CNN, and then that allowed the dossier to get put out into the bloodstream. Also, during this whole transition time, you have an unprecedented campaign of leaking classified information designed to put a cloud over Trump's incoming presidency. So I think Susan Rice has a lot of questions that she's going to have to answer. Why would you all of a sudden, right as you're leaving the White House, do that email saying Obama said do it by the book? It's just a really odd thing to do. She was trying to create a record, and the question is, why did she feel the need to do that?
Well, what's the answer?
I think we have to find out the answer. I mean, I think that it was clear that by the time Trump got inaugurated, you had the permanent bureaucracy and the Obama holdovers. I mean, they were feeding information to the press on a daily basis. The first 2 or 3 months of his administration was constant bombshell reports, quote unquote, all based on anonymous sources, all based on former or current U.S. officials. And that really started from the day he got elected all the way until the appointment of Robert Mueller as special counsel.
So the dossier itself, which is the center of all this dossier that BuzzFeed published for public consumption, claims that Trump was being cultivated by Russian intelligence for 5 years prior to becoming president. Is there any evidence that's true?
No evidence that that's true. And think about even what they used for Carter Page. I mean, the idea that the Russian oil company, the energy company, was going to give him a 10% stake or a 20% stake in a company that is so big, that would have been $10 billion that they were going to give to Carter Page, and the FBI used that to get surveillance. So the only thing that has definitely been corroborated is that Carter Page did travel to Russia during the campaign. He did that. He gave a public speech. None of the other key facts have been corroborated at all.
Well, and not surprisingly, am I overstating it when I say, as just a normal person reading the dossier, it seems prima facie absurd? Like, you'd have to be a moron to take that at face value. Was that your reaction to it?
Yeah, that's my reaction. I think it's spectacular, and I think it's something that Comey was actually right about. Salacious, but unverified.
And yet they used it as the basis for spying. That's upsetting. Congressman, thank you. Good to see you. Richard Goodstein is an attorney. He advised both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns. He joins us tonight. Richard, great to see you.
Thanks for having me back.
So this dossier, I think everyone concedes, is at the very center of everything. It comes from BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed, the publication, now has apparently hired a former FBI official and others to travel the globe and try and corroborate it, so far without success. But BuzzFeed is at the center of this. The FBI used this BuzzFeed document to justify spying on an American citizen. So I'm wondering, were there other BuzzFeed documents that are part of this? I want to put, like, this story. I read BuzzFeed. I'm sure you do, too. 31 slightly weird things all girls do in the bathroom but don't talk about. That's a BuzzFeed story. Was that in any way part of this investigation?
Anything else you want to talk about that's like relevant to the fact that we know?
22 jokes you'll love if you're lactose intolerant but can't stop eating dairy?
Can we talk about the fact that this whole premise is twisted, that the FBI shielded Donald Trump because they knew, the intelligence community knew, that's what they briefed the president and the vice president about in the Susan Rice memo, about the fact that the Russians had interfered and they went, outside their rules to go after Hillary Clinton. So can we at least have that as a premise?
Okay, so here's the premise is this. Allegations were made against the Trump campaign, very specific ones, that they colluded with the Russian government to win the election, that moreover the president had been a longtime Russian agent. And those are very serious allegations. The former president took them seriously enough. As you just heard, he considered withholding intelligence from the incoming president. And so the question is, if you make allegations like that, do you have any obligation to prove them? And at a certain point, do you have any obligation to admit they weren't true and apologize?
Yeah, let's put aside this whole 5-year business. Let's talk about what we know.
Why would we
what we know?
aside?
Well, because what we know is that Michael Flynn was a foreign agent. Donald Trump hired
Donald Trump, Russia? I'm asking.
Turkey, we know that.
Is Turkey the same as Russia?
Well, he just didn't disclose what he was being paid by Russia or Turkey, right? We know that. And we also know, because of the wiretaps of Kislyak, that he asked Kislyak, look, go easy. We're going to not proceed with the sanctions. And guess what? We just saw that within the past 2 weeks. Lo and behold, they didn't.
Didn't Trump, am I misremembering this? Did Trump campaign on that? I think he campaigned on that in public. Does that make him a Russian agent? Because that's actually a policy position. You can be against sanctions against Russia, as I am, and not be a Russian agent? Does that make sense?
I think that any U.S. official in the intelligence community would be derelict if they knew that the national security advisor coming in could be compromised because he had lied about the fact that he was a foreign agent. He did not disclose that. And guess what? Just like Rob Porter was subject to blackmail, so is Michael Flynn. And guess what? If you're coming in, well, I'm just saying, we don't know what you're putting this as Trump. What the president was saying in the Susan Rice memo is, essentially, we've got a guy who's going to be sitting steps from the Oval Office who's a foreign agent. Okay, and we know that he's got these ties to Russia. We know that he approached Kislyak, and we can't trust that he won't approach Kislyak about something that's more secret than sanctions.
Let me just ask you a question: Are you allowed to have a different view on sanctions than the one Barack Obama had, or the one that you have, or is that criminal?
It's not a question.
Do you realize that you're going insane on TV right now? I mean, you're actually saying things that are not only legal but totally legitimate.
I think
and you're acting as if they're immoral.
What's insane is that it's normal that you would have as your national security agent official a foreign agent. That is insane. That is demonstrably insane. And that's what we had. Sorry.
No, actually we didn't at that point. No. And I would say, as I've said 100 times on this show, that it was wrong of Mike Flynn to take money from the government of Turkey. But in point of fact, when he showed up to work at the White House, he was not a foreign agent at that point. And like a lot of people in Washington, including a lot of people he took money from a foreign government to change American policy. I think that's wrong. It happens every day. And our policies are driven by that fact, as you know.
People don't do that in the White House. In the White House, he used his authority to basically push policies that were going to benefit Turkey. He told Susan Rice, don't go into Raqqa. Why? Because it was going to involve the Kurdish military, which was adverse to Turkish interests. So this is, you talk about traitors. That's traitorism.
Okay. That traitorism.
Yes.
Okay, we're coining new words.
We are.
So let me just ask you this. None of that actually gets to the point. I mean, you're saying that he had taken money from the Turkish government. That's wrong. I agree with you on that. But none of this has anything to do with the core claim, which has basically wrecked our government for over a year. And at a certain point, do you feel like maybe you're responsible for this insanity, which is destroying the concept of due process, making it impossible for anyone to think clearly? Do you think maybe I'm part of this? Maybe I should pull back a little bit and be rational?
Let me make 4 points in 10 seconds. The Russians said to the Trump people, we can help you. Donald Trump Jr., love it, bring it on. The Russians did it with Wikipedia, and Trump, therefore, used it 100 times on the campaign trail, encouraging the Russians to steal from Hillary Clinton, okay? So that is, yes, that is a problem.
So does it bother you that the Hillary Clinton campaign paid through a foreign intelligence agent, Steele, Russian sources to gather Russian government information to use against their opponent, Donald Trump? I'm not sure why that's so different.
I'll tell you what. One theft,
it's very different.
One theft, the Russians stole. And what Hillary Clinton did was get information that was, frankly, a matter of public record, right? And incidentally,
it was a matter of public record that Trump was working for the Russian government for 5 years.
And
what public record was that?
And incidentally, when the Mueller report is finished, we'll see what was fact and what's not. You can laugh, we can laugh, but I have a hunch
can't tell whether you believe it or
you're not going to be the last one laughing here.
Yeah, I don't know. I may have to leave the country. If all this is true, then nothing I've believed in or nothing that seems real is.
Well,
pretty scary. Richard, thank you.
Sure.
Piers Morgan just made the stunning claim that the former White House aide and semi-professional television figure Omarosa offered him sex in return for helping her win Celebrity Apprentice. And that's not the only crazy thing that Omarosa is up to, apparently. But Piers Morgan will join us next to confirm or deny the details. Stay tuned. Longtime reality star Omarosa Manigault, who amazingly worked at the White House at one point, has a warning for Americans who want the president impeached. Be careful what you wish for. In an appearance on yet another reality show, Big Brother on CBS, this happened last night, Omarosa blasted the vice president as a religious extremist. Watch.
Can I just say this? As bad as y'all think Trump is, you would be worried about Pence. We would be begging for days of Trump back if Pence became president. That's all I'm saying. He's extreme. I'm Christian. I love Jesus. But he thinks Jesus tells him to say things. I'm like, Jesus ain't say that. It's scary.
Meanwhile, over on The View, another reality show, the host there characterized the vice president's religious faith as mental illness.
And look, I'm Catholic, I'm a faithful person, but I don't know that I want my vice president you know, speaking in tongues and having Jesus speak
like
to
I
him.
said before,
I don't know if I want that.
It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you.
Exactly. Okay, well, that's different. That's different.
That's called mental illness, if I'm not correct.
Piers Morgan is editor-at-large at dailymail.com, and he joins us tonight. Hey, Piers.
How are you, Tucker?
So what do you make of this? But both of Omarosa's latest incarnation as a political pundit and of the dismissal of religion as mental illness?
Well, look, first of all, I find it absolutely ridiculous that we're even having to discuss Omarosa in any serious political context. And the only reason we're doing that is because she was allowed to have an office in the West Wing of the White House for nearly a year. I don't know why Donald Trump would have ever let her in there. She's already behaving exactly how I could have predicted she would behave. In other words, she's squealing like a canary and taking them all down, as of course she was going to. She's Omarosa. She's a reality television star whose only raison d'etre is to be a poisonous little viper, spreading gossip, innuendo, and terrorizing everyone in her wake. So, first question, what was she doing there? There is no sensible answer.
I mean, for all the time we spent on the Russia story, this is a bigger scandal. I agree. Omarosa worked in the White House? Really? Why? Democrats didn't even notice. I guess she's too, she seems normal to them. I guess. I don't know.
Well, the extraordinary thing, I think, is we have all this stuff about Rob Porter, which is a very serious matter, and it's quite clear that he shouldn't have been there either, given what we now know about him. And there are questions for the administration right to the top about who knew what, where, and when. But if we're going to apply that logic and judgment to Rob Porter, where was the same logic and judgment about having Omarosa with her own office in the West Wing? I mean, it is almost beyond parody. And yet there is a serious point to this, Tucker, which is who is the president surrounding himself with? You know, I have a lot of time for Donald Trump. I've known him a very long time. I met him when I took part on Celebrity Apprentice with Omarosa. But he's got to have better people around him in the White House, I think, than the types of people we see with Rob Porter and Omarosa.
Yeah, I mean, I think Omarosa's probably in her own category. I can say, having been over there a few times, that it's not chock full of Omarosas, but she did work there. She became famous for being horrible. I don't think it's an overstatement. You worked with her on The Apprentice. What's she like?
She's absolutely appalling. I mean, literally one of the worst human beings I've ever encountered in my life. And I've encountered a lot of bad people. She has no saving grace. She was vicious, conniving, scheming, plotting, treacherous. I mean, her first gambit to me, day one, first challenge, she sidles up to me. I've never even met this woman. And she says to me, "Hey, Piers, we should have a showmance." I said, "What's a showmance?" She went, she said, "On The Apprentice, everyone has sex together. So you and I could do that, and then we could sell it and make loads of money." I said, are you completely deluded? What? Please go away. She said, what's the matter with you? Are you gay? I went, no, just because I don't want to have sex with you on this show, that doesn't make me gay.
So anyway, this was your Me Too moment?
Literally for about... Well, I'm a victim here. I'm a victim of Omarosa, Tucker. But she gave me then for 4 or 5 weeks unrelenting 5 barrels of abuse, tirades, homophobic stuff, and really vicious, nasty stuff. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, she got beaten in the show. I ended up winning it. That stuck in her mind as well. Cut forward to the campaign, I think in the middle of 2016, I suddenly read she's going to be working for Donald Trump, the candidate. I'm like, what? How can that even make any sense? Then I hear when he wins, she's going to be in the White House. Now, again, I have a lot of respect for Donald Trump, but I'm afraid with Omarosa, this made no sense at the time. It makes no sense now she's left. She apparently achieved absolutely nothing in her time in the White House other than disrupting everybody. And you can just bet your life she was there listening, plotting, scheming, probably tape recording. We're now going to have Celebrity Big Brother and all the stuff will come out of that. Then we're going to have the book, then the docuseries, and then the Lifetime movie, Tucker, at which point you and I are going to have to leave the country because it is so ridiculously absurd.
That's one of the most vivid descriptions of anyone I've ever heard. Have you been in contact with her? I suppose you're not texting each other still.
You know what? We have not stayed in touch. I did bump into her once at a WWE wrestling event. And it's funny, the nausea I felt in the exact moment that she made that proposition to me all came flooding back. And I literally had to run to the restroom and regurgitate exactly what I had done all those years before. You know, she is beyond any reproach. She's a professional agitator of epic proportions and probably the least trustworthy human being ever conceived on God's earth. And for her now to be laying into Mike Pence about religion when religion has somehow created this monster is beyond any sense of realism you could ever wish to have.
What a life you lead. Running into Omarosa at WWE is so fantastic. Piers Morgan, come back anytime. Great to see you.
I will. Good to see you.
Thank you. Well, Democrats aren't pretending anymore. Dick Durbin just said it right out loud. We need to import more peasants so employers can save on wages. True. That story in its details next. Democratic Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois was surprisingly forthright this week about why we need mass immigration to the United States. Immigrants, Durbin says, provide the low-paying serf labor that American employers so desperately want. Watch.
Take a look next time you go into a nice restaurant in Chicago, a city I'm honored to represent. Look who just cleaned the dishes off the table. And when the door swings, take a look at who's in the kitchen doing the dishes. By and large, it's going to be immigrants who are doing those things. Not many of us say to our sons and daughters, I'm hoping the day will come when you decide to go and pick fruit for a living. Hardly ever hear that, because we know it's hard, backbreaking work, and immigrants do the work. So many jobs that they fill are jobs that Americans aren't jumping to fill.
Actually, fruit is picked by machines, but whatever. Ryan Eller is Executive Director of Define American, an immigration advocacy group, and he joins us tonight. Ryan, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tucker.
So it's so striking for someone as old as I am to see a Democrat make this case. So there are millions of Americans who can't get by. Half the country can't get $400 on a day's notice. They just don't have any money. Millions of people are on food stamps. What they need are higher paying jobs. Here you have a Democratic senator saying, no, the point is making sure that employers can pay as little as possible. And so we need to import a lot of people from third world countries who will work for less. How does that help Americans? And why isn't the emphasis on raising their wages?
Yeah, well, Tucker, I think what I would suggest that Senator Durbin was leaving out is the fact that many immigrants, in fact, twice as many as citizens, start businesses. They come over, they try to bring their families to start family businesses, join families of faith, and sure, many are working in our fields, and frankly, our agriculture industry would not survive if it were not for the 3/4 of immigrants that are working in that industry, just like in many cities.
No, I don't know if your facts have caught up to current reality, which is that agriculture is increasingly mechanized. It takes far fewer people.
It sure is.
It is, yeah, overwhelmingly mechanized, actually. So among DACA recipients, just to pick a group about whom we know a lot, what's the single most common job for DACA recipients? Working in restaurants. So you're talking about low-wage, low-skilled jobs, and you're also talking about people who are less educated than average native-born Americans. Only 5% of DACA recipients have college degrees. So that's exactly the group of jobs that's going away because of automation. There's been a lot of study on this. It's very weird to me that you would import millions of people to do jobs that are disappearing. Why are we doing that?
Well, because the more immigrants that come here, the more jobs are actually created. So the rhetoric is good, and I realize, look, I'm here in Kentucky. We're a poor state. My own family, matter of fact, I worked on a farm when I was growing up, so I know what kind of back-breaking labor that is. And I know what we're talking about, and I'm worried about that part of the economy too. But the truth of the matter is, what we're talking about here is has been the backbone of our entire country since the beginning. It's always been family-based migration, as it was for your family.
No, what you're doing, and I realize that you're a minister, and I get it, but you're making a kind of moral argument. I would say half-baked, but that's what I'm making, an economic argument. Do you know what supply and demand is? It's the rule, the never-changing rule, that if you have an overabundance of something, its value falls. So if you bring in 1 million new laborers every year, what happens to wages at the low end? Do you know? Can you guess? They go down.
Well, all of the data is suggesting actually that overall, on the whole, wages go up on that economic argument. And I would say that's the same for your great-grandfather.
Okay, so how did we, I'm just, as an economic matter, how did we suspend the law of supply and demand when it comes to immigration? It applies to everything else in life. Sand is cheap because there's a lot of it, but that's not true for immigrant labor, because why?
Well, because the more human beings that are in a place, the more they can buy your products. The more human beings that are creating businesses, the more business and entrepreneurship you have. That's been the trick for all of American history. That's what has made our economy so vibrant.
But
and
why
I hate to go back on that, Tucker.
Well, but hold on. So by that, and I think I don't think you have the facts on your side, but just as a theoretical matter, if low-wage labor makes you rich, why isn't Mexico richer than the United States?
Well, first of all, I would suggest that you can go to defineamerican.com /facts matter, and you can see all of these
and
facts.
And it actually is richer than the United States. Oh, the fact. No, but if importing poor people makes you rich, why hasn't it worked for the rest of the world?
Why is the America, Tucker, that was good enough for my great-grandfather and clearly good enough for your great-grandfather who didn't have the merit that you're talking about to come, why is that no longer the America that's good enough for immigrant families
I would say you know nothing about, for one thing, my great-grandfather. Second, I would say because the economy has changed. It's 2018. We are in a post-industrial part of the economy. It's also a lot easier to get here than it ever was. And by the way, McKinsey just estimated that by 2030, we're going to lose 73 million jobs. You seem not at all concerned by that.
Yeah.
And I bet you if I looked at your donors,
concerned.
it would be big businesses who want cheap labor. I'm just throwing that out there. It's just a guess. But you're ignoring facts that are relevant to modern America.
Matter of fact, I'm supporting those facts. Look, we ought to be concerned with the mechanization of labor. Immigrants are not creating that. Matter of fact, you look at all the businesses that have been created by immigrants in Silicon Valley that would not be here, literally, if the current plan on the table that the Senate is looking at and that the Trump administration is proposing were to be passed. And so,
that's actually, so hold on, I'm not here to defend Congress or Trump or whatever. I just want to defend the country and say, then why wouldn't we limit all future immigration to immigrants with the same profile of the people who started those businesses in Silicon Valley?
Well, because that's not what the current plan suggests.
No, but why wouldn't we say, look,
if you have
an advanced degree, no, if you've got a degree in engineering, you can come here. How's that? Regardless of color, national origin. And if you have a high school education, you can't. Would that work, do you think?
Well, did your great-grandfather or do you have an engineering degree at a graduate level?
I was born here. I don't have to justify, but these are people who don't live here, and we get to decide whether they come or not. Why wouldn't we get people who are more impressive? Why would we bring people in who've got fifth-grade educations? What's the answer?
Well, because we're a country that in our most prominent harbor reads, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning.
So you don't have an economic argument, but you're going to use a little moral blackmail based on a 100-year-old poem by a socialist. Got it. Thank you, Father.
Worked pretty well for our...
Yeah, okay, I'm sure. Well, a Los Angeles judge just handed a big win to illegal immigrants and a big setback to the rest of the country. We'll give you the details next. A federal judge has issued a ruling suggesting that a core part of ICE's immigration enforcement is unconstitutional. U.S. District Judge Andre Barot, Jr., who is, of course, an Obama appointee, says the L.A. County Sheriff's Department violated the rights of illegal immigrants by holding them at the request of federal authorities instead of granting them bail. Thanks to that ruling, illegal immigrants are now entitled to monetary damages financed by taxpayers. Evangeline Gomez is an attorney, and she joins us tonight. Evangeline, thanks for coming on.
Hi, good evening, Tucker.
So you've got a left-wing federal judge who has declared that illegal immigrants, once they sneak in, have a right to be unmolested by federal legal authorities, and if Americans try to do something about it, they're the criminals.
Well, actually, the characterization that you make is incorrect. These were not people who snuck on in. These were, majority of these people were individuals who were here on a work visa that had expired. Some individuals in this case were actually U.S. citizens who were just born in a foreign country. And what happened here, it's a practice, honestly, Tucker, that's been going on for many years now in different parts of the country. ICE finds these little local jails. In this situation, it was Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, which I was surprised by. Typically, you see this in more obscure places.
Wait. Let me just be really clear about something. The American citizens who are born in other countries, that's a mistake. I mean, that's not germane to the policy, and it's not germane to this debate. They were accidentally picked up, and they shouldn't have been.
That was part of the class of plaintiffs that sued and that actually won in this situation.
Hold on.
That's not true.
What is true is the judge's order pertains to people here illegally, and I should clarify, it doesn't matter how you got here, whether you ran over the border, whether you overstayed a visa, you're here illegally. And so the question is, are we allowed?
One person was a U.S. citizen. At least one person that was named.
But that person doesn't apply. That's not the point. U.S. citizens have a right to live here by definition. It's their country. But people who are here illegally don't have a right to be here.
Tucker, if I could state this, what was illegal here was how the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department was operating. They basically were getting these detainer requests, and it's a request. It's not a requirement for them to act in accordance with, okay, by ICE. Okay, so it's voluntary on their part. They're not required by law to act on this. They were then rounding up and picking up people simply on these detainer requests, which did not have any probable cause. That's what the judge found. There was no probable cause for these detainer requests.
What rights do Americans have? I'm kind of losing track here.
Okay, Tucker,
do we have a right to tell people who are not here legally to leave and to make them leave if they don't leave?
What you need to walk away with in this case is that undocumented immigrants have legal rights. And what was happening here was completely illegal.
I'm very aware. I hear every day. But what are our rights as Americans? Do we have a right to tell people who are not here legally to leave? Do we or don't we?
Tucker, we do have a right as taxpayers and as citizens, and I'm glad you brought this point up. It's very poignant. We have a right to make sure that our tax dollars are not being directed towards chasing people who are here and whose matters are to be dealt with
propaganda. I want to know, do we have a right? Okay, I get it.
Civil courts. These are civil offenses. These are not crimes. Being here because you overstay a visa is not a crime. It is a civil offense.
So let me ask you,
to be dealt with in the immigration courts, which we, of course, the taxpayers pay for.
You can try and outshout me, but I'd really like to get a clear answer on this, which is, does the country have a right to determine who from other countries gets to stay here and to say you are not allowed to be here, you didn't go through the process that our Congress designed, and now you have to leave? What you're saying is, no, we don't have that right.
I'm not saying that.
And if you don't have that, yes, you are. Yes, you are, and you devote a lot of time to stripping us of that right.
I do not devote that type of time. I'm not an immigration attorney. I do not devote any time to what you are stating. What I am saying is that the court found that these are matters that have to be resolved. These are civil offenses that have to be resolved in the immigration court.
I get it. Do we have a right? Hold on. This is important. This is the core question.
And so is the judge's ruling.
Does the country have a right to tell people who are here illegally to leave? And you're saying no. And the entire left is saying no.
I'm not saying no, and neither is the left. We have laws that provide protections. These matters. If you want to deport somebody, that's fine. You don't go to a criminal court. You go to the civil court, immigration court.
But the feds have no jurisdiction in the states in immigration matters? That's what you're arguing.
No, they do have jurisdiction.
Oh, they do. Tell that to the Attorney General of California.
In the immigration courts that have been established by our laws and that we as taxpayers pay for. When they take money out of your paycheck and they take money out of mine, it's to pay for these courts to make sure people do. Then that goes to the legal defense if illegals who we're being mean to, who aren't supposed to be here in the first place, and we're violating their rights. Actually,
I wish you would spend more time thinking about the rights of American citizens like me.
I do. I'm an American citizen. I do think about my rights.
And
we protect ours, and we protect those that have constitutional rights, which they do. Supreme Court decisions.
Yeah, I got that.
Many.
Yeah, I got that. Thanks.
Have a great Valentine's Day.
Yeah. A Princeton professor has been forced to cancel his class on free speech after students couldn't handle speech. That story with Britt Hume next. A professor at Princeton has just discovered the limits of academic freedom the fragile feelings of students. As part of a lesson on free speech in an anthropology class, a professor called Lawrence Rosen asked students whether it was worse for a white man to physically attack a black man or to use a racial slur. Students didn't react well. Many stormed out. At least one got right in his face and screamed the F word. Rosen has now canceled his class. Fox senior political analyst Britt Hume went to college when it was different, joins us now. So Britt,
it's been a while, though. Don't ask me how long it's been.
I won't. But what I found so striking about this was this class was this is not something he just threw out there. This class was about speech, what speech is offensive. It was an anthropology class. How odd is it that Princeton students couldn't handle it?
Well, we're talking here about the N-word, which is one of the ugliest words in the language, and
for sure,
and we don't go around using it for that reason, and and it's offensive. However, I would submit that there is a difference between using the word and mentioning the word. There's a difference between using the word, that is to say, calling someone that, or speaking of others and using that word, saying that they are, that, and mentioning and discussing the word. And in a class devoted to this very subject of language and what's offensive and what's not, you ought to be able to mention the word, and in so doing say the word. After all, the professor wasn't calling anybody by that name. He was simply discussing the word itself. And that's a distinction that seems to me has been lost in this absolute wave of political correctness in which some things are simply now unsayable.
Yes.
And to me it makes no sense.
I mean, I like most people, I hate that word, and I don't want to hear it. But I also would like to think that Princeton students would be rational enough that if you said to them, look, we're having a discussion about speech and violence, and is speech ever violence, for example, and this is a horrible thing to say, but here it is, that they would be able to track with that, and they'd be smart enough to kind of understand what you were saying, but they don't seem like they were.
No, I think that, that there is, one of the problems here, Tucker, is that America is a compassionate country, and a country that strives for justice and equality, and we want to be sensitive to other people's feelings.
Yes.
And therefore, if you're a victim in any of these areas, it's kind of a good deal. You get a lot of consideration. You get a lot of sympathy. And it seems to me that we've reached a stage in America where we have people who are basically going around applying for victim status or seeking to be offended so they can react to it and be indignant and even yell F-bombs at college professors. And I sense that it's utterly regrettable. And you see this sensitivity going on all the time. I mean, this is what we mean when we talk about little snowflakes. Our colleague, Fox News contributor Guy Benson, ran into resistance up at Brown University, another Ivy, where people said it was offensive and wrong for him to be permitted to speak there. This is all part of the same phenomenon, and it is very widespread. It is very disturbing. It's been widely reported on, and I think most people in America disapprove of this, and yet on it goes. And the responsibility, it seems to me, falls upon these university administrators and the faculty, which put up with this crap and have for a long time, and this needs to stop.
In the letter at Brown, they accused Guy Benson, who's probably the nicest guy in the building, of enabling white supremacy, which is insane. In the 20 seconds we have, if you had an 18-year-old right now, would you be worried about sending that child to college?
Well, I have an 18-year-old granddaughter who is at college, and I'm pleased to say that there hasn't been many reports at the college where she's going of this kind of stuff going on. But it very much concerns me, and yeah, I am concerned about it. And I've got another granddaughter coming along in a couple of years who'll be headed off to college, and I very much hope that she will choose a college and will be able to get into a college where there's a minimum of this kind of stuff going on. But more than that, Tucker, I hope that by that time, that the attitudes about this will change, and that these college administrators will begin to grow some backbone.
I hope so. The revolution will have burned itself out. Britt, thank you very much.
You bet, Tucker.
Great to see you. Well, if you travel at all, you know that CNN is ubiquitous in airports. So why does America's least impressive cable channel dominate America's least pleasant locations? We actually looked into that question. We've got findings for you next. Well, if you've ever been to an American airport, you may have noticed something. Everyone's watching CNN. They don't have a choice. Well, that may have made sense 20 years ago when CNN had a centrist reputation, but these days the channel has strayed so far to the left and is constantly promoting wacky Russia-related conspiracy theories, along with strange spiritual advice from resident philosopher poet Chris Cuomo. You got to wonder what's going on. Airports feel like a lesser version of hell with dirty seats, overpriced food, and propaganda posing as news on CNN. So why is this network, this channel, in every airport in America? We decided to find out, and in a surprisingly large number of cases, the reason is that CNN is literally paying to have you watch them. CNN has a special package called CNN Airport. It combines news, sports, and travel. In at least 60 airports, CNN has signed agreements to show the channel. At Miami, for example, CNN Airport pays the airport authority a minimum of $150,000 a year. In Minneapolis, the airport authorities there told us, quote, CNN covers the costs related to the TVs and infrastructure and pays us for the opportunity to be in our facility, which raises the question, how much would you have to be paid to watch CNN? If the answer is no amount would be enough, we don't blame you. Unfortunately, at the airport, you don't have a choice. When given a choice, people don't watch. Hope that changes. Good night. Over to Sean Hannity in New York City. Hey, Sean.
Was that a rhetorical question? You can't pay me to watch CNN.
No,
There's the answer.
That's true.
All right. All right, Tucker, thank you. Welcome to Hannity. We have a ton of new breaking information for you tonight. According to a new bombshell report, the House Intelligence Committee is honing in on former Obama intelligence officials John Brennan and James Clapper about how they may have politicized and, in fact, weaponized this phony fake news dossier to go after Donald Trump.